Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And this time, we're going to get into the life and philosophy of Porphyry.
Okay.
Now, you know Neoplatonism pretty well, so we can skip all the intro stuff.
Right.
But Porphyry is really someone who I think deserves a closer look because he did so much to shape how we understand Neoplatonism today.
He did. He really did.
So let's just start with like the basics. His background, I mean, he was born in Tyre, ended up studying with the big guy Plotinus in Rome.
Yeah.
What's so interesting to me is like the main source we have for his life is the life of Plotinus,
Right.
which Porphyry himself wrote.
Oh.
So it's like, how much are we really getting like the unvarnished truth? You know?
Well, it's kind of like if you read a biography of someone that was written by their most devoted student,
Right.
it's always going to be colored by admiration and a desire to present them in the best possible light. But I think even despite that potential bias, we can still get a lot of valuable insights into Porphyry from that book.
Yeah.
You see his intellectual development, you see his deep respect for his teacher.
And how that shaped him.
Absolutely, and that's huge.
And speaking of being shaped, I mean, this guy's philosophical output was massive.
Oh, yeah.
Religion, philosophy, logic, vegetarianism, like
Bro.
nothing was off the table.
He wasn't afraid to tackle the big questions.
No, he wasn't.
He really wanted to connect these philosophical ideas to like all aspects of life. It wasn't just theory for him. He wanted to know how they could be lived,
Right.
how they applied to ethics, how they could even change our relationship with the natural world.
Okay, so let's get into some of those ideas now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you being a philosopher, you already know all about like
Right.
the sensible realm versus the intelligible realm, emanation from the one.
The basics.
Yeah. But how did Porphyry take these ideas and make them his own? Where do we see him diverging from Plotinus, or maybe even challenging him?
Oh, that's a good question. One area is his approach to mythology. He took a very systematic approach to interpreting myths, like Homer's myths, as philosophical allegories.
Wow.
He saw them as containing profound truths about the nature of reality and the soul's journey.
So he wasn't taking them literally.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He was looking for the deeper meaning, the philosophical message hidden within these ancient stories.
Interesting.
He even wrote a whole book called Philosophy from Oracles,
I've heard of that.
where he tried to synthesize pagan beliefs with Platonic philosophy, which is a big departure from Plotinus.
Really?
Who, he respected traditional religions, but he didn't put so much emphasis on their philosophical interpretation.
So it seems like Porphyry was more interested in finding ways to connect different ways of thinking,
I think so.
different systems.
Yeah, trying to reconcile seemingly different traditions.
That's really interesting. And we see that too, right, in his work on logic,
Oh, absolutely.
commentaries on Aristotle.
He was the first Platonist to really delve into Aristotle's logical works. And he did it with this goal of showing that these two giants, who are often seen as opposed, could actually be reconciled.
I mean, that's a pretty bold move.
It is.
Trying to harmonize Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah.
So what I'm really curious about is his interpretation of the categories.
Okay.
Because as you know, Aristotle classified everything that can be said to be into 10 categories.
Right.
How did Porphyry square that with Plato's theory of forms?
Well, he made this really clever distinction. He said that the categories weren't actually about the ultimate nature of reality. He saw them as focusing on what he called signifying expressions,
Okay.
meaning they were like linguistic tools that we use to describe the world around us.
So Aristotle was talking about language.
Exactly, not about the actual metaphysical structure of reality.
So that's how he bridged the gap.
That's how he did it. It's a really ingenious way to reconcile these two seemingly opposing views.
It's like he's saying you need both.
You need both.
You need the Platonic and the Aristotelian.
To fully grasp the complexity of reality.
Yeah, and we see that same idea of bridging philosophical systems over and over again in his work.
It's a recurring theme, this desire to find harmony and coherence.
Okay, so let's move on to another area where I think Porphyry made some really huge contributions, and that's psychology and ethics.
Right.
This is where his ideas about the nature of the soul and its relationship to the body and the path to true happiness really come into play.
Yes, and his understanding of the soul was so nuanced.
Yeah.
He followed Plotinus in distinguishing between the higher soul, which is our rational intellect, and the lower soul, which is responsible for our bodily functions and desires. But he went even deeper into how those two aspects interact.
What I find so fascinating is this concept of unfused union.
Oh, yes.
Because, as philosophers, we're always wrestling with that mind-body problem.
Right. How can something immaterial like the soul interact with the material body?
Exactly. And so how did Porphyry deal with that?
Well, he drew on Stoic philosophy, and he used this concept of unfused union to explain it. He argued that the soul isn't present in the body by location, but by a disposition or inclination towards it.
Hmm.
It's like, think of a piece of music being played.
Oh,
The music isn't physically inside the instrument, right?
no.
But it's present through the vibrations and the sounds that it produces.
Right.
So the music and the instrument, they remain distinct, but they're unified in that experience of listening.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah.
So the soul isn't literally inside the body,
Right.
but it's connected through this kind of force or energy that governs its functions.
Exactly.
And this idea of unfused union has some big implications for his ethical views,
It does.
especially his ideas about virtue and happiness.
Absolutely.
So, which leads us to the four kinds of virtues.
Yeah.
Civic, purgative, contemplative, and paradigmatic.
It's a roadmap for spiritual development.
It really is. And what I find interesting is, even though he sets up this hierarchy,
Yeah.
he acknowledges that not everyone can reach the highest level.
Right. He says that even those who only achieve civic virtue can still experience a certain level of happiness,
Right.
albeit a lesser form compared to like the pure joy of contemplation.
But still a kind of happiness.
Yeah,
And that's pretty progressive for his time.
it is.
Like, he's not saying there's only one way to live a good life.
Not at all. He recognizes that individual differences matter.
Right.
There are varying degrees of spiritual attainment.
So his ethical system is all about individual growth,
It is.
striving to be the best version of yourself,
Absolutely.
but recognizing that that journey is going to look different for everyone.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really powerful message
It is a powerful message.
for any time.
For any time.
Really.
Especially today.
And that idea of individual striving that really resonates with me. It reminds me that philosophy isn't just about these abstract theories. It's about practical wisdom, like figuring out how to actually live a good life.
Exactly. And Porphyry, he didn't shy away from applying those philosophical principles to real-world issues, even ones that might have been considered radical for his time.
Like his arguments for vegetarianism.
Exactly. His treatise on abstinence from eating food from animals. It's quite a read.
It is.
He lays out this multifaceted argument against eating meat, and he draws on both ethical and spiritual considerations.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just like, don't eat meat,
Ooh.
right?
Right. It's about the implications of our dietary choices, the connection between what we consume and the state of our soul.
Yeah, what I find really compelling is how he argues that animals have a certain level of rationality, that they can experience pain and suffering. It's like a precursor to modern animal rights movements,
It's this recognition that our moral obligations extend beyond just our own species.
And he's saying that killing and eating animals is actually an act of injustice.
Yeah.
It's a violation of their natural rights.
A violation of their rights. And that was a radical idea for his time. It shows how he was willing to challenge conventional wisdom and apply these principles to everyday life.
And it's interesting, too, how he connects vegetarianism to spiritual growth,
Yes.
saying that a plant-based diet promotes purity and lightness,
Yes.
makes it easier for the soul to ascend to the intelligible realm.
It's a spiritual practice,
Yeah.
a way to cultivate the soul, to align ourselves with these higher principles of harmony and nonviolence.
And this is where his synthesis of different philosophical traditions is so clear. He's drawing on Stoic ideas about moral obligation, Pythagorean concepts of purity and purification,
Right, bringing it all together.
and of course the Neoplatonic framework of the soul's ascent. It's all woven together.
It's not just theoretical synthesis either. He's advocating for a change in how we live,
Yeah.
a real shift in our lifestyle based on these principles.
So it's really about putting philosophy into practice.
That's it. That's it.
Okay, so we've talked about his views on mythology, logic, psychology, ethics, even vegetarianism.
We have.
Is there anything this guy didn't write about?
Well, there's one area of his work that's caused a lot of debate among scholars. The authorship of the anonymous commentary on Plato's Parmenides.
Oh yeah, the Parmenides commentary. Ah,
It's a tough one.
it's dense, it's metaphysical.
So what's the controversy?
Well, the commentary presents a slightly different interpretation of Neoplatonic metaphysics than what we see in Plotinus and even in Porphyry's own writings.
Okay.
It suggests a more nuanced view of the one, hinting that it's not entirely separate from being.
So the one is both beyond being and somehow participating in being.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
And it's a really tricky concept to wrap your head around.
it is.
And it's led some scholars to believe that Porphyry couldn't have written it.
Because
Because he was such a devoted student of Plotinus, they say he wouldn't deviate so much from his teacher's core doctrines.
But others say it could represent a later stage in his thinking. Exactly a period where he was exploring these more complex metaphysical questions and maybe even pushing the boundaries of Neoplatonism.
So if he did write, it really changes how we understand him.
It does. It suggests a level of intellectual independence and a willingness to question even the most fundamental principles of his own school of thought.
And it makes you think about the nature of philosophical influence,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Was he just echoing Plotinus, or was he really engaging with those ideas, pushing them further, refining them?
Challenging them.
Yeah, it shows that philosophy isn't static.
Right.
It's not just this fixed system of beliefs. It's an ongoing process.
Of inquiry, of wrestling with tough questions and constantly searching for deeper understanding.
And even within a school of thought like Neoplatonism, there was room for debate,
Oh, absolutely.
interpretation, and the evolution of ideas.
For sure.
And that's what makes studying someone like Porphyry so rewarding. You see him engaging with his predecessors,
Yeah.
building on their ideas,
Mhm.
synthesizing them, and then ultimately contributing his own unique perspective.
It's a reminder that even within a tradition like Neoplatonism, there's space for innovation,
Yeah.
for new interpretations, for pushing the boundary.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, let's not forget his controversial work against the Christian.
Oh, yes. A shame we only have fragments of it.
You know,
Yeah.
it would have been fascinating to see his full critique.
It would have been. It seems, though, that he was less concerned with, disproving the core beliefs of Christianity
Really?
and more focused on pointing out what he saw as inconsistencies within the Bible, questioning the historical accuracy.
So more of a philosophical fact check.
Exactly. He was approaching it from a philosopher's perspective, using logic and critical analysis to examine their claims.
And it's important to remember he was writing at a time when Christianity was still pretty new.
Very new and gaining influence rapidly.
So his critique was part of this larger intellectual debate.
It was about the nature of truth, the validity of different religious traditions, the role of reason in understanding the divine.
It reminds us that philosophy is about engaging with the real world, wrestling with different perspectives and searching for truth.
Wherever it might be found.
And even though his work was controversial, it shows how philosophy can challenge established norms
Absolutely.
and get people thinking critically about their beliefs.
Make them question what they think they know.
Exactly. It's amazing to think that Porphyry was dealing with issues that are still so relevant today, almost 1,800 years ago.
I know, right? The relationship between faith and reason, the search for meaning in life, ethical dilemmas.
It's all still stuff we're grappling with.
Absolutely. And I think his work actually gives us some ways to approach these challenges.
How so?
Well, he shows us how important it is to think critically, to be open-minded and willing to really engage with different perspectives, even opposing ones.
Like when he tried to reconcile Plato and Aristotle.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
It seems like that's something we've kind of lost sight of these days.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in our own little echo chambers.
For sure.
But Porphyry shows us that it's possible to find common ground between ideas that seem contradictory.
Right. It's not about just agreeing for the sake of it.
No, it's about genuinely trying to understand.
And I think for you as a philosopher, one of the key takeaways from Porphyry is this emphasis on the power of philosophy to change us.
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't just interested in intellectual analysis.
Right.
He really believed that philosophy could transform our lives, lead us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe.
He saw it as a way of life.
A way of life, not just something you study in a classroom.
And his writings are full of advice on how to live that philosophical life.
Yeah, how to cultivate virtue, purify the soul, align yourself with those higher principles.
It's a good reminder that philosophy is not just about thinking.
It's about putting those ideas into practice.
I love that philosophy as a practice.
It is a practice.
And, in a world that often feels so focused on material things and superficiality, I think Porphyry offers a much-needed alternative.
He does. He reminds us that true fulfillment comes from within.
Yeah.
From seeking wisdom and connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
He challenges us to look deeper, to question what we think we know, and to really seek truth.
It's a call to action.
To live the philosophical life.
To embark on that journey of self-discovery.
Guided by reason, contemplation, and the pursuit of truth.
Exactly.
And that journey, as Porphyry shows us, isn't meant to be taken alone.
No, we do it in conversation with the great thinkers who came before us.
Drawing inspiration from them, finding guidance for our own explorations.
Like we're adding our own voices to this ongoing conversation.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Porphyry, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
If Porphyry were alive today, how do you think he would approach the challenges and opportunities of our modern world?
That's a good one. I think he would bring that same curiosity and open-mindedness to today's issues.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be afraid to criticize what he saw as wrong, but he would also try to understand the reasons behind it.
Always looking for ways to bridge those divides.
Right.
And I think he would encourage us to use our reason to have thoughtful discussions and to try to live meaningful lives, even amidst all the complexity.
He would remind us that seeking wisdom is a lifelong pursuit.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, it's been a pleasure exploring the world of Porphyry with you.
Likewise.
And all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it enlightening and inspiring. Until next time, keep seeking wisdom, keep asking questions, and keep the philosophical conversation alive.